And I'm hoping all the questions to Mr. Gopal Krishnan will be about success and beyond, and not about the stock price of Tata Consultancy, though I personally would love to know it, but let's leave it to success and beyond for the moment. So, sure, thank you. Motivated in your current job till I find my right fit in the Lego puzzle of life. So, Mr. Gopal Krishnan, how do I keep self-motivated in my current job till I find my right fit in the Lego puzzle of life?
I can only share my experience.
Absolutely, sir.
I cannot give you, I don't have pat answers and solutions. What really should motivate you is finding that little shape which you fit into. Doing your current job is a means to that end. So it's not difficult to keep yourself motivated if the quest is there. I was asked, I studied back in the 60s, if you studied computer engineering, you were a cat. It is not so common today like software. I started my career as a coder in the computer department because it was a very Brahminical sort of job, in those days, as compared to civil engineers and chemical engineers and mechanical engineers. But when I joined Hindustan Lever, my boss said, you cannot learn to computerize till you know what actually is the transaction that happens in the field. So you have to go and work as a salesman, supervisor, accounts clerk, depot dispatch clerk. For 1 year, I was packed off. This must have happened to many of you. I can only share my experience, I can't share your experience. I hated it. But thank God they made me do that. Because by accompanying the bullock cart in Nasik, Igatpuri, Pimpalgaon, shop to shop, and repeating 40 times a day, Mala kai paije, serve sachet, sir, 10 box gitla, 2 taka fukkat. I learnt a bit of Marathi. And I went and understood the pains and the travails of a traveling salesman. I stood outside Sankni Street in Baikala, getting boxes loaded onto trucks and making dispatch summaries because there was no computer. But I understood the problems of the guys who were sweating. Wow. So that people like me could sit in an air-conditioned office and run it on the computer. And I will always be grateful to Hindustan Lever for making me do that. And any other employer who does it. Because at the age of 21, you don't think that that's a means to an end. But much later you realize that the end is always, I heard Swamiji saying just now, if you reached your goal, then you don't know what to do with it. So the goal must always be just outside your reach. And that is the way to keep yourself motivated. In all the jobs I hated doing, I didn't enjoy being a dispatch clerk. I'm grateful I did it. So that's my experience.
Sure, thank you. Looks like all 70 of us have given me questions. So, like Gopal Krishnan said, I have the mic, so I guess I'll decide. Swamiji, this one's for you. What is the difference between inspiration and momentary motivation, which dies out in a short time?
So, inspiration is something which is a deep calling, it resonates within and it sustains. And you find ways and means to sustain. Momentary motivation could be intrinsic, could be external also. There could be many things outside also which motivate us to do certain things, but that drive doesn't sustain. And also that inspiration is something which is much, much more selfless. And if you really get inspired by that, it is like that moment of awakening. And then you hold on to that moment of awakening. Like he said, the example of Gandhiji. So it was a wake-up call for him at that time. So inspiration is that kind of a wake-up call which comes, like Swami Chinmayananji was sitting on the banks of the Ganges and he felt inspired that how Mother Ganges flows from the mountains to the plains and serves millions of people. Why should this knowledge not go to them, to the masses? And it is because of that that people are suffering. They don't know what is the cause of sorrow and stress and how to face. So that was a turning point in his life. He converted that wake-up call into a turning point. And his own teacher told him that Don't go down. You will get stuck in the cycle of karma. Man starts action first and then action takes over. People who want this knowledge will come back to you. But he didn't allow that moment of inspiration to die, because it was not just a momentary inspiration. It was a deep calling within. And that's why we said that if it resonates with you in terms of your swadharma, it will remain. That is the difference.
Okay, this one is addressed to the both of you. I'll leave it to choose. How does one tackle or address the conundrum of aligning personal values and philosophy with those of the organization and established practices of functioning of the industry and the business in general? The sticky ones are being passed around, okay.
I love this metaphor of this jigsaw piece and the shape and fitting in. In all your life, in all my life, when I think back, I have found that it's the constant exercise of fitting the shape. ये कहाँ पे बैठता है? Your relationship with your family, with your wife, with your partner in business, with your boss, with the values that you have. And when it doesn't fit, you can push a little bit and twist it a little bit. But if it still doesn't fit, you can start to hammer it. Then it breaks beyond a certain level of hammering. And that is the way I found possible to establish a alignment between your values and the values of. Again, if I may take examples, and please don't think I'm always giving examples from my career, because I cannot give it from your career. The only thing I know is my career. When I joined Hindustan Lever in 1967, I was 21, young fellow. And there was a lot of anti-multinational feeling in the country. For those of you who are in my age group, you will remember socialism, George Fernandez, Indira Gandhi. And multinationals were soon after proscribed from operating in India through stringent restrictions called FERA, Foreign Exchange Regulation Act. At that time, many of my colleagues who were young people at that time, like me, said, हाँ ये बात ठीक है, हिंदुस्तान में बहुत गरीब लोग हैं, we must work for public sector. In those days, Indira Gandhi put public sector on a pedestal. And they left and they went on to public sector. Hindustan Lever made a very spirited argument why Unilever should hold 51% equity in Hindustan Lever. We had a chairman who felt that a father and a child, a parent company and a child company must have a strong relationship. At least 51% equity. If it's 40%, he said, paraya ho gaya. Just an investment. So he mounted a very major campaign, of which I was a very, very small part. I was a junior officer at that time. But I got to study how the case was developed. And I was torn in my value system. There's one part of my brain saying, yes, we are a poor country, we must find our own solutions. And multinationals are perhaps not such a good idea, public sector is very good. There's another part of my brain saying, you can't live life with painting everything with one brush. This is like saying all Gujaratis are like this or all Tamils are like that. How can you say all multinationals? What is this multinational in which I am working doing? And I found a lot of very positive things that my employer was doing in this country. And so I rationalized and said, this is a cause worth fighting. And that I have to change my opinion of casting all multinationals. So when people say all Muslims are like this, all Hindus are like this, sweeping statements causes misalignment. When you test each case, you come to a different thing. And that's how you fix your own alignment to the company. In spite of that, if you can't reconcile it, by all means, move on to what you like.
Okay, thank you. Swamiji, this is for you. It's simple enough. Sounds simple enough. Why is it difficult to practice mindfulness?
Because we have not trained our mind to do that, that's all. We have trained our mind to do many, many things. We have never made it single-pointed. We have experienced single-pointedness, no doubt. Whatever we love doing, the mind does it with single-pointedness. And in that one is fully absorbed. But there is no conscious practice of that. That's why in the Gita, Bhagavan says that abhyasena tu kaunteya, vairagyena cha grihyate. You have to do abhyas of that. And nobody teaches us abhyas of single pointedness. If that is not enough, more abhyas of multi-pointedness is taught. To do things more and more is considered as a great achievement or a skill. Many, many things at the same time. So both these contribute towards not being able to practice. But I think it is not very difficult to practice mindfulness. More than practice part of it, it is what I feel for that work. If I love cricket, nobody has to tell me that watch cricket mindfully. India may be playing worst, but I will still be glued to the television because I love cricket. So the moment love comes into play, mindfulness also will happen automatically. That's the key there.
May I add a comment to that? Yes,
Please,
if I may?
please.
You know, I just wanted to say that I loved your, in one of the clips that you used, I think Swamiji said it, that, or you said it perhaps, that we are either living in the past or in the future and find it very difficult to live in the present. And that's really true. This whole question and discussion on mindfulness, when you quote Arjuna or Gita, or it gets mixed up in people's, or so-called secular people's minds with being Hindu, Indian. This is nonsense. If you read the latest SNB, Strategy and Business magazine, which is like HBR, the latest one, please read, there's an article on mindfulness. It's written by a professor in America. He's written a book on mindfulness. So I got a copy of the book. It is saying the same thing, but it doesn't refer to Arjuna and Kurukshetra and all those things. But I paid $28 to buy that book. And I will quote it also. But the moment I say Arjuna, you'll say he's wearing a saffron shirt, kuch gadbad hai. I think we have to get over a bit of this mindset. A lesson is a lesson, mindfulness is mindfulness. And if I may share a small personal experience, when I'm in India, since I want to make a point, I rely on whichever example suits my purpose. It may be about Arjuna, it may not be about Arjuna, it may be about a corporate context. But when I go abroad, especially in the US, I always make it a point to try to quote Arjuna or Duryodhana or one of the mythological conversations or episodes. And they appreciate it like hell. They really think it's a very wonderful story. But here, they may say, ye kuch ponga pandit ho gaya hai, ye bhi bolne laga hai. If Swamiji says it is acceptable, if I say it is considered a bit ponga. So I just thought I would like to make a passing mention. The concept of meditation that's written, please buy this book, $28, Mindfulness. And if you find one, I've not read all the 250 pages, but if you find any page which is at variance with what he tells you, then I will pay the $28.
So presently we have enough publications beyond less than $10 at the end of the hall.
Exactly. Exactly. But people go and buy that book because
So-
it's written by Professor so-and-so.
Moving on, I think in the interest of time, I'll probably take just two more questions. So this one is out to you as well, Mr. Gopalakrishnan. I'll combine two questions. However strong and effective reforms and the economic policies are, will they succeed if we are not honest, sincere, and dedicated to the nation? That's one question. And the second one, again, is seemingly simple enough. How do you handle failure? Failure.
No, the first question, the answer has to be, yes, we must be honest. But what is honesty? Who has to define it? Sorry? Truthfulness. But what is truth? I just spent the whole morning trying to tell you there is no absolute reality. So here's a story. True story. I've covered it in my fourth book, which I've written about my family. My grandfather was an agriculturalist. He was a priest in the temple, like good Tamil Brahmins are. In a remote village, even today, that has a population of only 3,000. My father was born into that family about the same time as Guruji. And then with some sort of education, he came to Calcutta and then built himself up. Probably all our families have similar sort of stories. But he got a job because he had an elder cousin and an elder brother. And you know, there is this biradari. my cousin, my brother, Mera Gaon Wala, which brought him to Calcutta, and then somebody puts in a word. Is that honesty or dishonesty? In a Western context, that is dishonesty. You're using your position to. In an Indian context, that's perfectly acceptable. If one Sardarji goes to Canada for farming, you can be sure there'll be 1,000 within 1 year, and there'll be 10,000 within 3 years. And when they come back, all 10,000 will come back together. So, I think if we take a practical view, that honesty is not an absolute virtue, but is relative. And while I believe intensely in my concept of honesty, I should not judge the other person's standard of honesty, then the nation's objective can be achieved. But when I become judgmental about everybody else being dishonest, मेरी अकल और मेरी ईमानदारी सबसे ज़्यादा लगती है, that is a defect. So that's the first question.
The second was, how do you handle failure, sir?
I think the answer came in what Swamiji said. He said, be intensely in the zone. Again, what is written in the Gita has come out by Sikchik Mihanyali in his book on concentration. He said, be in the zone of what's happening at this point of time and don't worry about the result. So, I'll take one example from music. It's not about handling failure, but about being in the zone. If you see a Western classical music ensemble, there are probably 50 people performing. There's a very key person called a conductor who's got a stick in his hand. And if you're not familiar with it, he seems to be madly waving his stick. And everything, beautiful music flows. The script is written down. Everybody's role and timing is settled. They play to a very measured script. And the whole act of concentration is on adhering to the script. You go and see a Carnatic vocal performance, or even a Hindustani for that matter, there won't be 40 people. I'm not talking of Bollywood. There'll be only 3-4 people. One is playing the tampura, one is singing, one is playing the mridangam or the tabla. And somewhere down the line, they seem to depart. There is no script. They are just enjoying themselves. Sawal, jawab. They are in their own zone. Both are forms of concentration. But each one is living in a different, their particular zone. And I think the best way to handle failure is to live in the zone of what you're doing. And then it may succeed, it may fail. We'll see that later.
Okay, Swamiji, this one's for you. Is there a work-life balance required in life?
Definitely work-life balance is required. There may be prioritization which will happen, that work needs more priority at a certain time. But precisely because that pressure of work is high, I need a balance to cope up with, to equip myself with, to handle that pressure. So in every stage of life, as a student, there's a lot of pressure of academics. In work, there's a lot of pressure in the corporate environment. So every stage of life, there is a certain priority, and that does exert some amount of pressure, and that does take away more of time and resources. And the balance is required not only to keep me inspired for that pressure and that priority, but also it is required for me to have the holistic picture, not to forget the complete picture. If we do not have that complete picture and that balance is not there, that's where we allow small things to get to disturb us, or like failure to make us feel sad. Failure is an event. I learn my lesson and I keep going. But I equated that I have failed, and then I have lost my bigger picture, because I've got stuck with that one particular goal which I wanted, and then I didn't get it, and then so the focus also remains, as they say in the management world, the macro picture must be always there with us. That's the work-life balance. That work is a part of my life. There are so many other factors. Today we are seeing so much of increase in lifestyle diseases because work-life balance is not there. And ultimately the doctor will tell you that only, make lifestyle changes, get up early, sleep early, eat small portions every few hours, don't neglect the health, all that. So definitely it is very, very important.
So this one goes out to you. It's a combination of two questions. I'll try and put them together. Swamiji mentioned about having an integrated personality. Mr. Gopalakrishnan, did you encounter a challenge where your integrated personality could withstand the onslaught of external opinions for you to achieve fulfillment? I'm sorry, if I could just read that again. Uh, Swamiji mentioned about how an integrated personality is necessary. Mr. Gopalakrishnan, did you go through a challenge where your integrated personality could withstand the onslaught of external opinions for you to achieve fulfillment?
Okay, I'm going to answer it the way I've understood it.
Okay, if with your permission,
answering
Neeraj
the
could
wrong
probably
question.
Neeraj could probably read it out better than I did.
No, it's
Did
not
I get the
my
crux
fault
of it,
for
Neeraj?
reading, but my understanding.
Yeah. Okay.
If somebody wants to explain what he's meaning, or I will answer it the way I've understood it.
So you have the mic.
If I'm answering the wrong question, just somebody wave your hand. Swamiji talked about integrated personality. Did you ever find a threat to it due to external events? Have I got the question right? Yes, I did. Again, I'm a bit of a storyteller. And
Please.
if you don't mind, I'll narrate my own story. I had been in Unilever for 30 years, or 28 years. I had been modestly successful. I had become managing director of Brook Bond Lipton in Bangalore. I had had some stints working abroad. And I thought people had a reasonable impression of me as a decent, honest professional. When I came back from overseas, I'm talking of the 90s now, so please turn the clock back 20 years. I came back with these ideas, which were very well established in the United States and all that, but not so well known in India, that you show your faith in the company by buying its stock. And so when I came back, I found my company, Brook Bond Lipton, where I was appointed as the managing director, to have a number of issues and problems. So I went to my chairman, a gentleman called Sushim Datta, in case any of you have heard of him, he's the chairman of Hindustan Lever. I said, I've heard all of this. I want to show people that I'm not giving bhashan. And since I've had the fortune of saving a little bit of money outside, can I buy the stock? He said, yes. We've got a body called SEBI. When I was away from India, all this had been established. So you ask the company's legal department and follow the rules. So I asked the company's legal department, I got it in writing that I should follow step 1, process orientation, as Swamiji said. And I followed each of those processes. And I bought, I think, 5 lakhs rupees worth of shares. Then I was required to declare it, which I declared. And word got around that the MD is buying stock of the company. So he's not just talking, maybe he will solve the problems of the company. 1 year later, Brook Bond Lipton merged with Hindustan Lever.
Correct.
And SEBI, in its wisdom at that time, thought that I had done insider trading. So, one day in the evening at 9 p.m., I got a call from a journalist saying, I believe you have been sent a notice for insider trading. I said, I know nothing about it. How do you know? They said, oh, it's all over in Bombay. I was in Bangalore at that time. So I was very agitated. Next morning, one of the papers had my picture saying, nabbed, or some such word,
Nabbed.
And it went on to say. And then I found it very difficult to accept that I had been sent a notice which the press knew before I knew. I didn't even know what it was that I was being accused of. It took about 4 or 5 years. Then they closed my case. But I was in great anguish at that time. That answers your question. Did you find your integrated personality threatened? I said, yeah. Is it any way to interpret that I could have done? I have taken everybody's money. But let me finish the story with the last bit, which caused me another anguish. I had meanwhile left Hindustan Lever. I had joined Tata's. I was sitting here in Bombay House. 5 years had gone. And I get a call from SEBI, from a very senior officer whose name and designation I need not mention. And he had a hushed voice. He said, I'm so and so speaking. We have written a 13-page order finding that there's nothing wrong with what you have done. Will you come and collect the order? So I said, I'm glad that you've written 13 pages on a non-subject. But if you have done it, that's fine. Now that it's all 5 years old, why don't you send me the order by post? Or, through your dispatch department. He said, I can't send it through the dispatch department because then the press will get to hear about it. And the newspapers will report that you have been exonerated. We don't want...
We can't afford that. Yeah.
I said, this is damn good. When you're nabbing me,
Yes.
you gave it to the press before. When you're closing my case, you don't want the press to know. He said, I would also appreciate if you don't tell anybody anything about it. Today, the first time, after 14 years, I'm mentioning it in the public domain. And I was so angry that I said, I'm not going to collect it. Go to hell. He said, I'm not your tormentor, I'm also your friend. To get a passport, to become a director of a company, to open a bank account, they will always ask, is there any case pending against you? For the rest of your life, you'll be saying there's a case pending. Please be sensible, send your driver, I'm prepared. So I became pragmatic, I sent my driver, I collected it. And now I don't have to fill in, is there any case pending against you? I say no. So you have to be pragmatic.
Usually they call us so that they get bakshish when you go there, but in this case, it probably wasn't. Moving on, I think I'll take just, in the interest of time again, the last two. Swamiji, this one is for you. It's on attitude and aptitude. Often I find that even good workers in the team lack attitude and get into a negative mode by drawing comparisons. How do we change or inspire attitude in people in the team?
Positive self-esteem and self-love are the basis of a person not feeling insecure. In the world, the more and more people are judged by their worth, then they feel insecure, then they become negative. And also that genuine appreciation is not given, so again they feel deprived. These are things which make people become negative. And then comes comparison. And if this comparisons, the moment the person starts comparing, the comparison is because the centering is not within oneself. That person starts feeling insecure, negative, and this cycle goes on. To quote from Mahabharata, Duryodhan was constantly feeling insecure because his father made him feel that. His father was blind, he could not become the king. Pandu took over the kingdom, but ultimately the father became the king, but his insecurity never went. And through his son, he always wanted to feel more and more secure by making him more and more powerful. So that transferred on to the son. And throughout the life, the son lived an insecure life. Not only that, that went into the friend also, Karna. Karna was much more talented and powerful than Arjun. But again, constant comparison. And of course, his own life background also contributed to that. Now, even in our day-to-day life example, suppose I give you Sachin Tendulkar and Vinod Kambli. Both of them are very talented, same teacher. Vinod Kambli, in fact, is supposed to be more talented than Sachin Tendulkar according to Ramakant Archrekar. But why did Vinod Kambli reach where he is and Sachin reach where he is? Because comparison started in his mind. And Sachin remains rooted in himself. So the way to change our team members is to make them feel grounded in themselves, centered in themselves. Whether we bring up children, whether we handle our team members, are we creating environments of security and trust where people feel grounded in themselves, or are we trying unconsciously to motivate them through comparisons? So many times we hear, parents telling the children, same school you are also going, your brother is also going, same facilities you have, see where your brother is, see where you are. That creates that sense of inferiority in us. So to make people empowered and make them feel positive and confident is the way. And for that, there is one thing required is genuineness first. Second, a leader is one who invokes their potential. In Subhashit literature, there is a very nice Subhashit which says, Amantram aksharam nasti. There is no alphabet which cannot be used in a mantra. Nasti moolam anaushadam. There is no plant which cannot be used as a herb or a medicine. Ayogya purusho nasti. There is nobody who is incapable. Yojakas tatra durlabha. A leader who brings out that potential, that person is rare. So the quality of the leader is, am I bringing out the potential of that person positively? Am I making that person feel good about themselves and strong and secure about themselves? Then the need for comparison. And thirdly, consciously I must avoid psychological judgments and comparisons. No psychological comparisons. A functional comparison may be done, how we generally do, whether it is, trend analysis or what we have done in the past 6 months and what we should do in the next 6 months and whatever comparison, that's functional comparison. But psychological comparison is what makes a person feel inferior, insecure. Then comparison, all that negativity starts.
Okay. Apologies for the people who've written in. This gives us an excuse to have Mr. Gopalakrishnan join us another time. So I'm sorry I can't address these questions. So Gopalakrishnan, I'll end with a question from your dear friend Mr. Adya. And he says, where and how to find the right doctor who could put all the 5 lenses correctly so that I can see correctly through the 6th lens? Now, would you rather answer it here or at Bombay Gym? What would you prefer?
No, Srikanth, I'd like to answer it now.
Please, most welcome, sir.
I won't take more than 3 minutes. You are the doctor. You have to adjust the lenses. There is no optician here. I don't know if ladies also use musk odor, but men do buy aftershaves and scents with musk. The musk comes out of the Himalayan deer. The Himalayan deer, according to the poets and the romanticists, goes round in circles when it's in the jungle. And he has imagined that the Himalayan deer is going around in circles looking for the source of the smell, not little realizing that the smell is coming from itself. Please don't wait for an optician to turn these lenses around. Aapke haath mein. Now there's nothing to discuss in Bombay Gym anymore.
Now with this, I
Thank you.
take this opportunity to thank Mr. Gopalakrishnan on your behalf to be with us, join us this morning. And I'd request Madhuri to hand over a little token of our appreciation and look forward to a continued association with you, sir, in some form or another. Thank you very, very much for being here this morning.